evening, everyone. I'm calling to order the Middleton School Committee meeting on November 4th, 2024. As a reminder, this meeting is recorded. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any remarks from the public? Seeing none? Okay, before we get too far,
Howie's here.
I just wanted to give a quick shout out and thank you to the Middleton Fire Department on all their hard work in the past week. I think we're on day 9 of these brush fires, and I think we're all praying for rain. But thank you so much for all your hard work, and it has not gone unnoticed. So, moving on to approval of previous minutes.
So I believe there's one set in the drive.
Yep, from October 7th.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor of accepting the minutes from October 7th, say aye. Aye. Any nays?
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay. Okay. Any reports from other committees? Nothing? Okay, moving on to reports from the superintendent.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Good to see you all. Glad we got you all online. Welcome back from the weekend. A couple of quick updates. Our breakfast program continues to be running. That, as you may recall, is through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Something that we instituted back in mid-September, so September 23rd was the first sort of launch of that. We've been going for about a month or so, taking feedback at the school level, working with our vendor, Whitson's, on really updating the menu. We've noticed higher sugar content in some of the offerings that we've given that feedback to the vendor, and we're wondering if, breakfast is being pursued because of maybe what is being offered, as opposed to does breakfast need to be eaten. We don't want to have situations where someone's having breakfast at home, breakfast at school, a snack, and then lunch all within like 4 hours time frame. So we are working with the vendor. The November menu will look different than the the November menu will look different from the sort of September to October menu. There were honey buns and, chocolate chip muffins and, some of those things, and, chocolate chip muffins, exactly. So we said to the vendor, we appreciate that you're trying to, increase sales of the breakfast program, and at the same time, we only want to make sure that the kids that need it get it, and have offerings that are more fit. So I saw a menu today. I haven't looked at it deeply, but it was more like bagels and yogurt and more of the, I would say healthier fare rather than the chocolate chip muffins and the honey buns and things like that. So we'll kind of do it on a month-by-month basis to see where we go with the program in terms of, I don't know, what would you call it, not enrollment, but daily participation, I guess is probably the better word. What are you guys seeing for numbers still? Are they high?
It seems to be level.
Like the novelty maybe a little bit?
Well, it's still hanging at probably.
We're still over 100.
Over 100? Yeah, 50. So we want to see what the real number would be, right, without the sweets, so to speak, and see where that lands. And so we will monitor that. I think November will be a better indicator of maybe what a real number looks like. I think part of it was novelty in the beginning. Kids were just, oh, what's this? My friends are going. And then it was like, oh, chocolate chip muffin. I wouldn't say no to chocolate chips in the morning. I would do the same thing. But I think November, as I say, will be a better barometer of it. once we have the new menu in place. So we'll keep you guys updated on that as we make our way throughout the year, but as I said, we've had some feedback, and we also gave feedback to DESI too, just in terms of, it's an interesting program, right, in the sense of, they want all schools to participate, which is fabulous, and if you don't participate, it's one of those things where you'd have to pay for lunch again, right? So it's like, well, we like having the free lunch program, we think that's a good thing, and having a free breakfast program is also a wonderful thing, and at the same time, we just want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that matches the needs of our, particular communities across the 3 towns. So more to come on that for sure. Time capsule project, I got an email from Tommy Martinock, former fire chief, and I would echo the comments that Michelle made at the beginning. Just thank you to our fire departments, really across the region, certainly Middleton, and across the entire region. It's been a team effort for sure across the cities and towns, and we appreciate the work that they're doing. The email I got from Tom Martinock was, we're in the planning stages of placing time capsules at the new municipal complex. We'll be putting a capsule in the new town hall, in one in the public safety building. The project will be announced at the topping off ceremony sometime after Thanksgiving. The capsules will be placed during the dedication ceremony in late '25 or early '26. And I thought it'd be a good idea if the schools were to put something in the capsules. We have time, no pun intended, to think about what to put in. Just wanted to give you a heads up and maybe start brainstorming with staff. Let me know if you have any questions. So that's kind of an exciting thing. Who knows when that will be dug up, decades later. What would go in the time capsule? Maybe put a honey bun and see if it's still.
say, a chocolate
Or chocolate chip muffin. You just open it up 35 years from now and
Looks the
tear it
same.
right open. Exactly. But I also wanted you guys to be aware of that. I can't remember if I mentioned it to you already, but I think we'll be hearing from Tom Martinock, just like from a school perspective, what would be some interesting things for us to put in to the time capsule. So that's, we've got plenty of time, as he said. It doesn't look like it's happening until late '25, early '26, but wanted to get it on the agenda more than anything else. On Wednesday of this week, there is a community traffic forum. The flyer for that is in the drive. This was November 6th at Flint Public Library. Join Town Administrator Justin Schultzbach for a public forum on traffic in the town of Middleton. The discussion will include a review of recent traffic study data as well as planned mitigation strategies. That's this Wednesday. I'm going to try to attend, if the schedule allows, to just kind of hear what that conversation is. As we know, we've been navigating that with our driveways at both of our schools. Appreciate Joe's work on that this summer and Dave's work on that as well, and the work that Jeff and Jen have been doing at their schools. So that's that one. And then just as an informational item, made aware that there'll be a special town meeting on 12/12. And at that meeting, I think it will take place most likely at Hal Manning. That's where they usually are. I don't think there's a ton of warrant articles, but you guys might have more information on the special town meeting than I would, just living in town. So I don't know if we want to unpack that a little bit more.
Yeah, from what I understand, there's going to be two warrant articles. I think one is addressing the accessory dwelling units and the bylaws. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. And the bylaws that go along with those. And then the other one, there's a confirmed citizens petition to have a revote on the MBTA Communities Act that was voted on at the last town meeting. So there will be a revote on that. I know some people here have attended some other meetings regarding that, if you wanted to speak more on that.
I've been to a bunch of the meetings. I find it really alarming that we voted as a town at a town meeting in May. We knew it was the carrot and the stick, right? The 2 million. It was 2.5 million was the carrot. We voted no. They still applied for the grant for the $2 million. It ended up being 2 million, not 2.5. And now they want to revote it. As a school committee member, I look at this like the bells are going off for me, the impact to our schools. It's a minimum of 750 units, and the office, Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, the people who are responsible in Healy's administration for putting this forth, I believe they estimate.
Natasha, sorry.
What's that?
Who's the administration?
It's part of Healy's, Healy's administration. It's the
Get it.
EOHLC is responsible for pushing this MBTA Act into the communities. The formula that I've seen is 0.8 students per unit, potentially, which is 600 kids. 600 kids. Like, even if we got half of that or even a quarter of that, where are these kids going? We don't, so it's kind of like, what's that saying, like you cut off your nose to spite your face or whatever, like $2 million, who doesn't want $2 million? Of course, it'd be great for traffic. but we have to look at the impact. If we have to build another $50 million school to receive, yeah, right, 50 million is being conservative, to receive all of these students, that's alarming. You have to sort of take the good with the bad. I've been sort of digging in on the MBTA stuff, on that website, the EOHLC, and there are, I don't know how many communities have voted yes. There's 177 that have to vote. I don't know how many have voted yes, but I went on their website today, and as of last week, there are 30 towns who voted yes, said this is our overlay, and they kicked it back and said, no, that one's not good. Do something. There were different specific, all the letters are posted online. That's alarming. If they're, right now, the overlay that we're talking about is at the Ferncroft. If the state decides they don't like that, and we voted yes, then they'll come back and say, put it somewhere else. Where else? Where else would we put it? You know, like 750 units is not small. I know Topsfield is like 100, they have a much smaller, 140, I think?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Boxford was like 200. We have this,
How did they get to that number, do you recall?
I have no idea.
Okay.
And it's a minimum too, which is like, again, I feel like we're all of us are maxed, like right now in life with everything going on in the outside world and all of it. And there's so much information on this MBTA stuff. Like I looked it up. It's like there are no restrictions on the number of, sometimes if you build a development, it'll be like 55 plus, or, you know, only 10% can have students, or there are no restrictions. They max out at 5 people in each unit. 5 people? You could have a 1-bedroom with 5 people in it? I mean, these are all things that I feel like we need to look at as a community, as a school committee. Like, how would this impact our budget? It would be catastrophic, I think, is the word that comes to mind for me. In addition to all the other resources. Water, we're always on a water ban. Traffic, we're having a forum this week. Police, fire, it's a bigger conversation, but for us here, it's school. And I don't know if anybody else is following it, maybe I'm.
No, I'd like to say a couple of comments.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, from a school committee perspective, if, you know, a lot of people have come to me, well, this isn't going to happen right away. You know, a lot of people say this is going to maybe potentially happen 4 or 5 years down the road. Well, even if it's 4 or 5 years down the road, I think if there's any type of like project built like that, we as a school committee have to be prepared, or at least have some information on, okay, how would this impact the school? How is it going to affect our budget? How is it going to affect logistics? Because I think families, a lot of people who move to these communities, move for the education, they move for the school systems. We have small classroom sizes. It would kind of change the dynamic and the fabric, and obviously we've always had budgetary issues, and this is just going to add to it. So I think at the very least, we should have a discussion, maybe not entirely right now, on how some of these numbers would affect our schools and our budgets, and could we even, you know, deal with it. You know, that's my position on it. So
Can I just ask, because I'm not clear, the meeting in December, it's not a yes, we're going for it, or no, we're not going for it. Isn't it, there's another step in between?
No,
No,
it's a
it's-
it's a special town meeting, so they need it. You can't bring an article, but there's a what's the word in our town
Bylaw.
charter?
A clause.
A clause in our, if an article is voted down, it cannot be revoted for a year.
Okay.
So you couldn't bring it, the select board could not bring this issue back because we're still in that 1-year
Okay.
timeframe. But they could bring another issue forward. The planning board is bringing forward the ADU bylaws. And then a citizen's petition was put in.
Okay.
The citizens can
Okay.
put it forth.
Okay.
So we have been, our application for the 2 million has been approved, but we're not compliant because we haven't voted yes.
And this 2 million is for traffic at
Yes.
the intersection
Yes.
of 114 and 62.
Right.
Yes. So we've been awarded the grant if we are compliant with the MBTA Communities Act.
and
So it's
that's
contingent.
pretty much the only
Yeah.
stipulation on there too. It's not,
Right.
there's no other real stipulations. It's just if you approve the MBTA Act, then you get the 2 million. If you don't, there's no counter. You can't say, yes, we accept the 2 million, but we're not willing to accept the MBTA Act. It's like, it's one or the other.
Got it.
So,
And one sort of point of clarification, because I've seen different comments online, like, and I attended the last select board meeting, and there was like a joint planning ZBA select. If we were to vote no, and we do not accept the 2 million, nothing happens to the intersection. The citizens of Middleton are not going to be tasked with paying $2 million to reorg that
Okay.
corner. It will just sit. I mean, the traffic at large, that corner here, I mean, everywhere, it's just, I don't know how much $2 million is gonna do. You're not widening Boston Street, you're not adding more lanes, so it's a bit like sand in a funnel, like you're just getting to that intersection, and maybe they would potentially put a turning lane. I think they did get an easement from the developer, but if the turning lane is only 1 or 2 car lengths, then the people who are way back at St. Agnes, it's like, it's not really doing much. It's kind of like what happened at the corner of Maple and 114, that Cumberland Farms. Like, it would have been really great if we had taken a whole strip off, turning lane would help, but that didn't happen, so it improved the traffic marginally. But again, I think it's just a bigger conversation, but for the purpose of this board, I mean, what would happen if whatever the timeline is, 3 to 5 years down the road, what would be the cost of a new school, and how would that?
Yeah, I mean, I remember we had this conversation somewhat at our Saturday budget meeting last year.
Yeah.
Where it kind of came up at the very end, and we were kind of. Yeah, exactly. And then I remember looking at the map, and I had to have to re-educate myself on the map, but I remember, like, we were a contiguous community, not a, like, we don't have a T-stop here. We're like Beverly, Ipswich, Salem, like those places have. So I thought they were under different circumstances than what, let's call a contiguous community was. And I would say now what I said then, in the sense of, I think for us, just as a matter of fact, more than anything else, right? No opinion here, one way or the other, but just more as a matter of fact. Kids don't come in like neat packages, no matter what town you're in, right? And they say this all the time. The principals say this all the time. Like, I don't know, we might need another kindergarten because we could have 10 kindergartners registered, or we could have 10 Fuller Meadow kids register, and we could kind of handle that, right? I think what separates the tri-town from, let's say, a city or town that has like 5 elementary schools, right? We have 6 elementary schools, but they're in 3 separate towns, right? And we don't even have 2 pre-K to 6. We have a K to 2 and a pre-K to, pre-K plus the 3 to 6.
Yep.
And so what I said back on that Saturday meeting that I'll repeat here is, like, if 30 kids were to show up, right? We don't have 6 schools to kind of distribute them to. Like, oh, we've got 6 schools, we can put 5 in each school, and we're all kind of okay, right? If 30 kids show up and they all show up at first grade, they're coming to one school, 1 grade, probably 2 classrooms at that point. And then you're into space needs and some of those other things. So I think that, to me, is just literally just a statement of fact more than anything else. Like, we're different from other places just in the sense that we don't have multiple elementary schools. We have 2, and the 2 aren't even, you couldn't even divide them equally among the 2, depending upon what grade they would be, whether it's 1 year from now, 3 years from now, 7 years from now, unless the committees decide, like, all right, let's make both schools pre-K to 6. And I would argue against that personally, because I think there's a huge value of what we do where we can really dive in on early education and then dive in on upper elementary. I think that's a gift that we're able to do that in all 3 of our towns for sure. So, Natasha, just go back to the votes so I have it in my head again. So there's 2 votes. One is approve the 2 one is to say we want to be an MBTA community, and then if it's a no, then there's no second vote.
Correct,
Okay,
right.
got it.
So
that would be the first vote.
If we voted no, it would be, the deadline for being compliant, voting yes, is 12/31.
Okay,
So the push is on, that's why they pushed this meeting to 12/12, to get this voted
Got it.
for the 12/31 deadline.
and then isn't there a case, like a Milton case that went to the Supreme Court?
It's in the court now.
Sitting, yeah.
So do we
Sitting
know,
in
is
the
that
court.
gonna, if it's at the Supreme Court, will that have a bearing on, like, all these other towns that are grappling
It
with this?
should.
Okay.
I don't know, but we don't know the timeline. It's just interesting to me that they didn't put this out a little longer. Like, maybe you punt on it and say, since so many towns are voting no or
Sure.
delaying.
Or
a lot
Supreme
of-
Court has a case.
Yeah, we'll just put it to May, like, what's the rush? Actually, here, one of the select board members in, like, April, when we were coming up on town meeting, said, I'd prefer that we move this issue because of the Middleton situation and because there's so many balls in the air. Let's move it to a special town meeting in the fall or the winter, or December. And it was agreed that, no, we'll just vote in May, which we did, and there was the outcome of that. I don't know, I just, the thought, I mean, I see the project at the municipal and what that's costing us, our taxes, the thought of like looking at a new elementary school in the next 5 years is, and to your point, as far as the fabric of the community, like I think the teachers like a smaller class size. I think the parents and the students like a smaller class size. Like, we came from Peabody, and we left Peabody to come here because I didn't want, in Peabody, to your point, they'll put you at the Welch or they'll put you at the McCarthy or whatever works, you can get bused over there or whatever. And we wanted smaller, more tight knit, and that is going to completely change the culture of what happens here.
I just think from, $2 million is a drop in the bucket when you consider the costs that are on the opposite side, the other side of this, right? So it's, if you have $2 million up front, which in today's terms, $2 million is very little, right? It's not gonna, I don't see how it's gonna have such a dramatic impact on the traffic. It may have some impact, and maybe a little bit, but to kind of, I don't want to say sell ourselves for $2 million, but I want to say it like, if we have to worry about all these other, and I think the public deserves to know down the road what these, I think, what's it, $18,000 per kid to put, so.
Roughly.
You multiply that by all the students that could potentially come into school, whether it's 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, and then the public facilities that we'd have to develop to support all that, I think it's going to be an astronomical cost, and I don't think that people who may be for the $2 million understand that there's going to be other costs because of this when that comes to fruition.
Is there what can our schools handle physically as far as if there was an uptick in kids? I meant not just a regular uptick on a regular September.
Yeah.
But if there was this massive uptick in the next 5 years, physically, what can the two schools handle roughly? Is there any, do we have numbers?
I wouldn't have a number off the top of my head, Joe. I could get you that for sure. I mean, I can tell you that, as Natasha and Dave talked about, like, I think since I've been here, the hallmark of the Middleton Public Schools has been low class size. That's been like a protected thing in the budget, right? Like, we've had to make some reductions along the way, and, you've sat on it long enough, and that it's always been like, yep, that's
Priority,
been the hallmark of how we have done business here, right? So you could run up class size for sure. I mean, we could add, kids to classes and things like that. There's a cost to that, right? There's a cost to, the growth and development and the connections that teachers have with the kids and the personalized relationships and all of those things. And you guys have heard me say this before, like, everything's changed in public education except it's still a 16-ounce container, right? We haven't changed the structure. It's 180 and 6.5, right? That's the number of days and the amount of hours in a day. But we keep pouring more and more liquid into this 16-ounce bottle, and you see it overflowing. You guys know, like, you see the challenges that are inherent in our schools, and we're fortunate that we have a community that supports public education. And even though we can't build a bigger container, we figured out other ways to kind of handle the overflow of all the things that we're now responsible for in public education. But so you could increase class size. That would be the first step that we would do. Like, before we say, like, okay, let's find some land to go build a new school, we would be running up class size at all the grades. But in doing that, you wouldn't be able to actually, I don't think you'd be able to add a lot of sections either. You guys are pretty,
Well, can we handle like 6 sections
That's
per
kind of what I'm
grade?
asking. You're pretty full now. I mean, you've got some room, but not for 600 students, 400 students, even 100.
Even if you run up class size, but at some point, there's a tipping point.
Correct.
Now you have to add a section. I mean, right now, to do that, we just wouldn't have the space in the building. 'Cause
You'd be
every room is
putting
occupied
people
with
on
something.
carts, you know what I
You
mean? Like,
think, you think it's the responsibility of the school committee that we should at least inform the parents that this is a possibility, that a lot of people have, this is the biggest investment. They moved to Middleton for class size, for teacher relationships, for, different educational plans that they couldn't get in other towns. I've heard that. This would impact it, and I've heard some arguments that it's not going to impact it with kids, but I've researched it also, and you don't have control of how these units are going to look. You don't have control over any of the type of, how many people per unit, how many bedrooms per unit. Do the families in Middleton, should that be our responsibility to put something out that this is on the table right now and this couldn't affect their families and their education and the class sizes? I mean,
I think that's what we're doing right now, discussing this in a public meeting.
could we do more of, maybe at the next meeting, a vote if we agree with the MBTA zoning or if we would go against it? Just as a school committee to let the parents know how we stand?
I mean, it's not really something that the school committee has, it's not really gonna change anything policy-wise, or is kind of out of the scope of what the school committee does, our job. I mean, we can voice our opinions as school committee members, but I don't think like voting on anything would really move anything forward.
Would there be any communication to the parents through the schools that this is on the table? I think that they should, a lot of parents are busy, especially this time of year. Some people are not going to know that there's a December 12th meeting. And I think that the parents should know that, their school system is at risk here. Their class sizes are at risk, their relationships with their teachers are at risk. I think there's something as a school committee that we could put, or in combination with the principals. I know probably not taking a stand one way or another, but maybe an informative piece that could go home to the parents. I think that should be in our responsibility to at least let them know that this is pretty serious. I've followed it in a time where my business is and I have property, and its effect, that's more of a city compared to a town, but it's going to have a huge impact on the schools here, and it's going to change, like David said, the fabric of the way Middleton is. I feel strongly that we should at least take a role in some communication to the parents that says, hey, this is on the table at December 12th, and if that's a statistic of 0.8 per unit times 750, there could be an additional 600 students, which could overwhelm our school system or cause us to build another school or cause us to do a different structure where we have 3 schools that are all K through 6. And it would change the philosophy of our education.
My quick reaction.
That's my opinion. I think
Yeah.
it's our responsibility to put something out to the parents.
Yeah, my quick reaction, Joe, would be a couple thoughts. So one, that's why we have our subcommittees, right? So Natasha is our communications liaison. I was just looking back at our org design that we voted back in the summer.
Thanks for letting me
Exactly.
know.
Natasha, you're communications liaison.
I thought it was the roof lady, but
You're also facilities, yes. We signed you up for a few.
perfect.
But that's why we have subcommittees, Joe, to answer your question, right? In the past, the newsletter from the principals becomes the vehicle, like we've done communications on the budget, like when we had the override last year. I think we put together some communication, or maybe in the past we've done, maybe it wasn't last year. And that becomes the school committee can work on something together, obviously through Natasha. And it could be something that if the school committee wanted to do a communication, you do it as a board, right? That's the one thing that's always so important about a school committee is like, Jackie's an individual member on the board, but the board makes these sort of decisions as a whole, right? Like it's a body that sort of moves things forward. When it's a campaign like an override, how I've always been sort of trained is that any communication is sort of, here's what a yes vote means, here's what a no vote means. Draw your own conclusion, right? It just sort of, it leaves it up to the reader, so it's not like anyone feels like something's being sort of.
Kind of like the book that goes out to
Exactly.
vote yes, it means this, yeah.
Exactly, like the questions that we just
Yeah,
got. Yeah, the
okay.
5 questions for tomorrow.
Yep.
Exactly. It's a great analogy. So if the committee wanted to do something like that, Natasha would be happy to work with you on
Okay.
just, language or whatever the case may be
Sure.
between now and the next meeting.
Okay.
And it would be the kind of thing where like, hey, as a school committee, we want to make you aware, a yes vote could potentially mean this, X, Y, and Z, factual, right?
Yep.
No opinion.
I agree.
A no vote could be X, Y, and Z, factual, no opinion. We just want to make you aware of this. We feel it's our obligation as a school committee to make you aware in this busy time of what could be coming. And you let people then kind of, and again, this is my opinion, you let people draw their own conclusions.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when people can draw their own conclusions, you're more apt to get
I agree.
the pushback. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It does.
State the facts on both
I
sides.
would be okay with that. I just want to make sure that we're not putting in there verbiage on like, please vote yes or please vote no.
Right.
I just want people
Yeah.
to be able
I'll
to
work
research
with
it
you
and
with
draw
that
their own
if you want.
conclusions.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, so I'm happy to like serve as an editor or, just whatever, like in any of those things, but we would just want to do it between now and the next meeting, so you could get something out, we could ask the principals to put it out in the newsletter, and then the school committee could have sort of, an informational piece on that, for sure. And would that satisfy, Joe, kind of how you're feeling?
I think it's great. I think it's our responsibility because this really potentially could be a humongous impact on not just class size, but the whole fabric of the educational portion of Middleton. A lot of people moved here for the schools. And that could drastically change with this zoning.
This on top of the ADUs, which are now by right. We still don't know, we won't know for, probably over the next calendar year, we'll find out, is it, we're gaining 5 students from that, we're gaining 50 students, but it's a lot of changes. I'm like a conservative person, I don't like to make all the changes at once, so the ADUs for this year, let's just see how that ebbs and flows, and, it's a lot.
I think it's important just to educate the
Yeah.
the people in the town.
And 12
Publicly, they don't understand what the impact is.
A lot of people don't even know that it's out there. They're
Right.
busy.
Yeah,
And,
And the week before the holidays is a tough
yeah.
time, but hopefully if people understand the yes vote means this, the no vote means that, then I can carve out an hour to be there and say whatever,
Yep.
vote however I feel.
And so one question again will be, do you want to be an MBTA community? So to speak. I'm not
Yes.
saying it well. If it's yes, then we go to the next question of, do you accept the $2 million traffic? Or does that just kick in automatically?
No, I think it just
kicks in.
automatically,
Got it.
yeah, basically they're saying, if you vote yes, you can have the 2 million.
Got it.
If you
Okay.
don't, then no. And then the other item on there is the ADU bylaws, and they're very, 80% of the bylaws are already in the law, like the maximum size of the structure, there's so much already carved
Identified,
into it. There's a
yeah.
few little tweaky setbacks and just little, but, I mean, nothing major.
Yeah.
Kinda is what it is.
Yeah, I think your idea of like framing it like our questions tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think that's a very familiar process to people. I think that's a great way to do it.
Okay,
Yeah,
sounds good.
yeah.
Okay, moving on to Steve's report.
Yep, so
And-
Steve is not here. Howie, though, I am going to let him know that Howie decided to nap Jeff under my table with him not here. Feeling pretty good at my number 2 position.
Just you, Matt, you're feeling shook right now.
So financial report is in the drive from Steve, and I asked him to give me a blurb, and he said for the Middleton financial report, everything is proceeding under normal circumstances. There is nothing extraordinary going on at this point in time, so we've had nothing unexpected. It's still relatively early in the year, although I was surprised. I was over today, and we were talking calendar, and I went back to my office. It's day 45, which is amazing to me. We're at like the quarter turn already. It feels like we just got back. We're already at the quarter turn of the school year. But nothing abnormal or extraordinary going on at this point in time from Steve. So happy to take any questions back to Steve if you have them, but everything seems to be on track.
Great. Very good.
Thank you.
All right, reports from the principals.
I'll go first.
Always.
Okay. Some of the things that have happened in the last month, Howie and I were at MassQ. We talked about that a couple times. We had a good presentation, decent crowd. We had about 20 people show up, which is not bad considering there's about 300 other presentations going on at the same time. And this was primarily a technology-focused conference, and Howie is anything but technology. But we had a good turnout, good reception on that. Katie Nasser also presented. She had 2 presentations at MassQ as well. We also got to go on the field, get pictures taken on the field, which was cool. I was holding my breath because I was a little worried how he might find a new place, a new smell to claim a spot as his own, but he did not. But that may have been the most exciting thing that happened at Gillette Stadium this football season. We've had our parent-teacher conferences, was that last week, 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago, I guess. The 2 Thursday, Friday, early release days. Again, very well attended. I thank all the parents for making the time to come out. And I thank our teachers for being flexible with that. They scheduled quite a few outside of Thursday and Friday afternoon. There were some going on all at 8 o'clock in the morning. Some were staying beyond the 3 o'clock time. Some were doing phone calls and video conferences for people that weren't able to carve out that time to get there. So thank you to both families and the staff. This past Friday, we had Costume Day at Howe Manning. We started that a few years ago, and it was actually a parent of a third grader reached out because they missed out on the second grade parade, so we agreed to do a costume day on the Friday, the half day before Halloween. So it was a little bit further away this year, but that half day is perfect because we don't have to go through lunch and recess and all of those other things with the costumes on. But the kids were fantastic with that. Last Tuesday was our culmination of the Booster-thon, the fun run. We were fortunate with the brush fires. We have had favorable winds over at Howe Manning. Just the way it's set up, I know it's been rough here, and there were some days I've been driving in saying there's no way we can be outside today, and then I get to Howe Manning and it's perfectly clear. I think we're here, the fire is here, and primarily the wind has been blowing this way to your house. So we've been very lucky over there, but it was a big success. A lot of parents showed up for that, and I believe the PTO is up around, it was about $48,000 raised, and that's before they've added in, there was some corporate matching that they were still adding up, but it was up to $48,000 that last I had heard. And fifth grade was the big winner. Mr. Druin and I are the big loser in that, as fifth grade gets treated to a lip sync battle between Mr. Druin and myself.
That's happening here at the next school committee meeting.
Yeah. We will be confiscating cell phones.
Like the date of this
everything else.
endeavor.
I know, I was
Anybody
gonna
wants
say
to
that.
come into
I
that?
wanna
Nope,
know when
that
it
will be-
is, so
I will
I
let
can
you know
watch
after
it.
the fact when it is done.
That video will appear at your retirement party at some point in the future.
Yeah, I'm sure, I'm sure. Why we agreed to that, I don't know, but it was in a weak moment at open house when,
So you're battling, leap sync battle with some kids?
no,
Oh, you have to do the
yeah,
lip
yeah,
sync?
me against Mike.
Oh, you against Mike?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
it Jimmy Fallon? Who does that?
I
Somebody
don't
does
know,
it
but
looks-
Fabulous.
I have to think
It's
of my,
crazy, though.
I may consult you on some Taylor Swift. That's
I'm never going to let live that down, my opening day presentation, never. Just trying to connect with the younger teachers.
We just started today our second annual clothing drive. I don't know if you recall, about this time last year, we had a fifth grader at the time, Gia, approached me about doing a clothing drive at the school. It was a big success last year. If you remember, Howie and I went to her house for a photo opportunity, and they had all of the clothes out on their front lawn, and it was just a giant pile that the company was coming to pick up later that day. So those boxes are at the front door and the back door. This is a good time of year to clean out closets and drawers if summer ever actually goes away, because I know it's warm again tomorrow and the next day. But once we get through Wednesday, clean out those closets, bring in the clothes, and just throw them in the box there. And I think, no school tomorrow. Friday is an early release, and then no school Monday for Veterans Day. And that is, I think.
How long
it.
are the boxes there for, the clothes box?
Boxes will be there, good question, till December 2nd.
Excellent.
That's the cardboard box I saw in the lobby today.
Yeah, we have one at the front door, one at the back door, so if kids come and get dropped off in the morning, they can just toss it in there on the way in. That's all I got.
Good, thank you.
Same, conferences went incredibly well. Same thing, we saw teachers having conferences at 7:45, 8 a.m. after school. So I think they were really trying to meet the needs of families. A couple of Zoom conferences for folks that said they couldn't come in. So I think by and large, most teachers were able to connect with just about everybody, and I think it was really a positive experience. Same thing, fun run / dance party, which took place here. It was a very interesting day because I come in and pass Howe Manning coming off of, was that East Street? I don't know the name of the street. I come off on 95, the Masco exit. and I had my windows down because I was like trying to smell, and I drove by Hal Manning and thought, oh, it's awesome. Let's smell a thing. Came around where the new safety buildings, and it was like this wave of just smoke, you know, and the smell in the car, and I pulled in and I was like, oh my gosh. So a lot of quick text messaging and, you know, PTO's waiting. I think Jeff was under the gun for, you know, making an early game day decision, which is hard to do when you haven't even shown up yet, you know. Whereas I was here and the air quality was definitely compromised here. And it was a concern to have kids out running for an hour. It's just incredible the difference between the two schools. So we did change and decided to have it inside, and they ended up doing a dance party instead of a run. I think parents were very disappointed because they enjoyed the event and they couldn't come, and it was kind of a last-minute cancellation. I would say by and large, I'm guessing most parents understood. I actually had some people reach out and say, thank you, I was worried about my kids outside running in that. And it was a dance party in the gym. God bless the teachers who, you know, it was a little wild and crazy and a lot of strobe lights and disco days, and they all leaned into it.
Can you save that for Jeff's lip sync?
You're right, right?
The strobe lights in particular.
It was crazy. So, you know, if they have not had this happen ever, you know, so we really didn't even know what we were getting into. So I think we all learned a little something. If that ever happens, maybe some changes we might make to how it rolled out, but you don't know until you do it. Kids had a blast. So $48,000-ish. I do think the PTO pulled off on the amount of commitment that the folks from the Boosterthon did, so I think they might have actually yielded more, somewhere in between full-on taking responsibility and giving it up entirely. Halloween, oh my gosh, it's a busy day at Fuller Meadow. It's probably the greatest joy I have to humiliate my 4 grown children because they get the picture every year for the last 25 years. And there were all kinds of family texts going because I was a bumblebee this year. And my daughter sent this mean thing that was like, the queen lives, and it was a picture of a queen bee. So my children, my grown children, had a lot of fun with it. We have fun that day. It's like you kind of lean into what you know is happening anyway. Teachers are great sports. They either come up with a theme for their grade level, they all sort of get into it, and the kids get a real kick out of seeing it. Parents, grandparents, whomever, they were all great. They kind of lined up in a really nice way so that we could come out, do a quick parade around, Monster Mash plays, we have a little fun. Parties, we've kind of dialed back quite a bit on that. They're what we would say maybe short and sweet, kind of a couple of crafts, a few parents come in to help us. So it's nice. And then kind of get on to your day, which after the dance party 2 days or two earlier and, you know, all of the stuff with the smoke and the craziness, it was a bit of a wild week. So we all very much appreciated our weekend, this past weekend. So the K1 and 2 teachers are continuing with coaching from the Hill for Literacy that I know you've been hearing about from Peggy. So we have done it by grade level. Kay was actually supposed to be today, but Molly, who consults with us, is sick, so we had to change the date. It's been a wonderful experience for the teachers. They have been incredible in that they come in, the coach comes in, spends about an hour and a half with teachers, modeling, explaining things, fielding questions, and then they go into individual sort of breakouts where there's some coaching with a teacher in the class. Modeling, giving feedback. It's a really powerful model to watch how the teachers have been supported with all of this work. So we're grateful. We have a nice relationship with the Hill, with the woman who we're working with, and the teachers have really benefited from it. So we're excited about one last go with kindergarten, and then that should be it. I think she goes on to 3rd grade over at Howe, and then we're just going to keep on trucking. Monday, we completed our relationship mapping, which we had talked about at the last meeting. Everybody did a nice job. We were able to look at the data and sort of align with our mentor program. So I should have checked the number, let's just say 15 to 20 staff who have volunteered to be mentors. I have been partnered up with a student. Letters go home to families just asking, you know, do we have permission to do this? They sort of explain the program. And then once the permission comes back, whoever you're partnered with, you would work it out with the teacher, 15, 20, 30 minutes once a week, you have an opportunity to do whatever works best. Some kids like more physical activity, some kids like to just go for a walk or sit and color and talk, play a board game, whatever that might be. And then lastly, Friday on the PD day, we're focusing on math, which is exciting because we've been doing a lot of work on literacy the last few years. And the primary teachers are having an opportunity to work on problem solving, fact fluency. Kira, the math coordinator for Middleton, is doing a really nice job engaging with teachers and finding ways that they can develop and hone their skills in math and using the Math in Focus curriculum. So that's what Friday, and then there's more specific training that happens for folks like specialists and more concentrated teachers. They get something a little different. So that is it, unless you have any questions.
No, I think we're
Okay.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to new business. The business office review.
Yeah, so wanted to bring this to the committee for their consideration tonight. So at our TTU school committee meeting that we had in October, we had talked about, okay, regionalization study, like put that in the rearview mirror. And, good report, and I think good information was gleaned. I think one of the glaring things that we saw in that regionalization report, one of the most challenging aspects of the inefficiency of the tri-town is the work that happens with the 3 town halls, right? We have payroll systems that are different, we have PO systems that are a little bit different, we have purchasing systems that are a little bit different, and so Steve and I have been talking about, like, that's an area that we'd really like to see, can we be more efficient and effective in, like, our business office, HR, payroll, accounts payable, all of those things. Again, it's very tricky when you work with 3 town halls and everyone has a little bit of different flavor of ice cream when you're navigating and working through things and so on and so forth. So as I said at the TTU meeting, we'd love to have someone come in, look at our business office, look at HR, look at payroll, look at accounts payable, and say to us, like, yep, you're actually running it the most efficient way you possibly can, or, you know what, you guys are like operating at 0.5% efficiency, you could be doing a way better job. And so I said to Steve, like, start to reach out to some firms and see, like, what kind of proposals we would get and so on and so forth. So we've had some come back, and the one that's of very much interest to us, a woman by the name of Mary Ellen Norman. She was a multiple award winner with MASBO, the Mass Association of School Business Officials, and she was president of the Mass Government Finance Officers Association for many years. And she put together a scope for us, and what her analysis would be, and we had maybe an hour Zoom with her. She would look at job role and function analysis, a job description review, a function and a desk audit, improvement plan to include process and procedure efficiency analysis, talking with municipal and school departments, interviews to understand the issues and barriers on improving data transfer and communications across duties and responsibilities, identify research automation efficiencies with process and procedure documentation and training of business office staff and municipal counterparts, work directly with business office staff on process and system improvements, training and support for budget management at the school level with curriculum leaders, principals, administrative staff, so on and so forth. I think the thing with her proposal that stood out to us was that she also wants to go into the town halls and have the conversation with the town halls and say, could the schools be doing a better job with how they interface with the town? Like, I'd like to know this. Could we be doing a better way of doing business, again, business, AP, payroll, HR? Because again, it's 3 different town halls, multiple sets of personalities across the 3 different town halls, and multiple systems that we function. There's just lots of hands on pieces of paper that it has to go through and so on and so forth. So bring it here first tonight. You guys are the first out of the gate with the November cycle of school committee meetings. We have Topsfield on Thursday, and we have Boxford next Thursday. We will be looking to see if the committee would be agreeable to us doing this study. There's obviously a cost to it as well. It's an unbudgeted expense. Having a conversation with Steve this early in the year, he has a comfort level with the number. It would be a not to exceed $8,500 for Middleton, a not to exceed $8,500 for Topsfield, and a not to exceed $8,500 for Boxford. So it'd be around 25 total for it, divided by 3, around, $8,250 to be exact, but I just figured 85 was a rounder number. And so bringing it to you guys, we talked about it, in more in depth at the TTU committee, for those of you that were at the TTU committee, and for those of you that sat on the regionalization committee as well. I think an understanding of, we're just trying to figure out how we can be more efficient and effective. I thought regionalization would have been one angle for that, but with that sort of in the rear view, this to me would be a good focus for us to see if we could be building a better mousetrap, so to speak, as it comes to those big areas. So happy to take questions from the committee. If it's something that the committee would be supportive of, the motion we'd be seeking is to approve funds in the amount of not to exceed $8,500 for the purpose of the study of the business, HR, payroll, and accounting offices. So happy to answer any questions that folks may have on it.
So you might not be able to answer this question, but, I mean, depending on what they uncover and what they think could be more efficient, do you think you could make back any of that money that we would spend on it?
Yeah, it's a good question. FTE comes to mind, right? Are we properly staffed, right? In the sense of, do we have the right amount? Like, we have 2 people in payroll, we have 1 person in accounts payable. You want to have that redundancy in payroll because if someone's out, like, we got to be payroll, right, so to speak. So you always want to have that redundancy in payroll. But I think, to me, it's more from a systems perspective, are all of our systems operating as best as they possibly can? Do we have redundancy of systems? Is there a system that we can let go of? There'd be a cost savings there potentially, because you pay an annual fee for some of those things. So it'd be tough to predict right now, but the chance is there, potentially. Yeah.
Okay.
How far off are the 3 systems, 3 towns? Are they completely on a different page, or are they similar?
Yeah, 2 towns tend to be more similar. 1 town tends to be a little less similar. Like, we do payroll for 2 towns, Joe, and in Topsfield, payroll happens at the town level. And that, that's just a challenge. That's just an inherent challenge. Like, that's something we'd love to bring that in, so we could do payroll for all 3 towns. The systems themselves, and Steve could speak more detail on some of these things for sure, but the systems themselves, in terms of how we operate, like, we use, the town uses Munis, and I'm forgetting the name of the product that we use, but we always have to make sure all of our work aligns with all of their work. There's lots of duplication of efforts in terms of conversations that have to take place. It's clunky and inefficient, as you would imagine it would be when you're in this sort of system where it's 3 separate towns, 3 separate budgets, 3 separate ways of doing business, and at the same time, trying to bake the same cake for the 3 town halls. And that cake gets eaten maybe a little bit differently at each of the town halls. So I would say 2 towns tend to be a little bit more similar than 1.
If they expressed a desire to, for the schools anyway, to try to get on the same page, or has there been any, like, blowback on that? Do they not want to change the way they do business? Like, if they've been approached before about trying to get one system in place for?
We've had some conversations with that 1 town around payroll, and, doesn't seem to be a strong desire at the moment.
Okay.
I would say we've not really brought them anything because we don't know any better right now. Like,
Okay.
we've just been kind of operating the way we've been operating. And maybe it is the most efficient way, right? I think $8,500 per town could be a potential, like, that'd be really good for us to know. I'm not saying anything that's not sort of out there publicly. Steve is much closer to the end than the beginning of his career, right? And, much closer. And, there's a lot of institutional history that will go when he leaves, because it's a very unique, like, there's these types of roles, these assistant superintendent of finance and operations, or director of business managers and things like that. You're dealing with 1 budget. He does 3, right, for the 3 towns. It's gonna be very interesting for me to see, like, when Steve does decide to say, I'm all set, who applies for that job, because it's a very, very unique job. So part of this, me too, is thinking about, he's closer to the end of the beginning. I really want to make sure when he does go, we are operating at peak efficiency, because, and to me, that feels like $8,500 is a lot of money, and then it doesn't feel like a lot of money because we could make $8,500 in mistakes in the first year when he's gone. And boy, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that.
I also think having a proper study done gives you the opportunity to go to each town and say, we've conducted this study.
Exactly.
These are the efficiencies, and then you have more credence in terms of, like, trying to get people to make change, right?
Yeah, it's not an
In the
opinion.
Topsfield,
Like,
yeah.
I think we could do better.
Yeah, because
Actually,
you don't know what,
we could
you don't
do
know what
better.
is the best way to do it.
I don't.
Yeah.
When would we have the results back?
This year.
This
Yeah,
year.
she would be, she was thinking like 3 months.
Okay.
So in my mind, I'm like, if it was like January, February, March, long around April, we're able to come back to you guys and say, again, what I really like is that they're gonna go to the town halls and talk to those people as well. Because the town hall might be like, boy, I wish the town did this better. Be good to know.
Yeah.
It
How's
just,
it-
it functions and operates every single day. Say again?
We're moving, town hall will be moving sooner rather than later.
Correct.
You were moving too, right?
Well, we're thinking about it. We're
Okay.
trying, we're still looking at that COA building. That was another thing we talked about at TTU.
Okay.
Yeah.
So lots of changes. I think it makes sense. I don't know.
I
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
I think it makes sense.
It just resonates for me, just from the seat I sit in and seeing the whole thing and knowing that, he's closer to the end of his career than the beginning.
Yeah.
So if it's the will of the board, we'd be thrilled for a motion to not to exceed $8,500 for a business office study. I think that would probably cover it.
I'll
Okay.
make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay.
Thank you guys very much. Another TTU, just a follow-up item. We talked about this at the TTU meeting. Our student information system, we currently use SchoolBrains. That's sort of, we've exhausted the value of SchoolBrains, I think, in terms of the capability of it. It's been a lot of frustration. We have to do a lot of reporting back to the state. It's kind of clunky. It doesn't really play well with the state system. I think a lot of frustration in the front offices with how we have to enter data and so on and so forth. So we had talked about looking at something else. Masco uses PowerSchool. Julie has kind of landed on PowerSchool. And so just letting the committee know that we're continuing to pursue that, right? It would be a one-to-one replacement, really, with anything else. Like we would stop using SchoolBrains, we would start using PowerSchool. There'll be a lot of training that we have to do and all these other pieces, but that seems to be continuing to head in that direction, which is, it'll certainly make life easier when we send data up to Masco. It'll literally be like, click, and off the data will go. But again, SchoolBrains was good from what we had before, but I think we are at a point where we're now starting to head in a different direction.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Of course.
Does Power School have the special ed component that SchoolBrains didn't have?
Good.
Yeah.
If it does, the vetting of it is that it wouldn't be as fleshed out as what we use for Frontline eSped. So our plan would be to stay with Frontline for the special ed component, which is also what Masco has.
Okay.
So Masco has Power School, but also Frontline for the IEP. So in the same manner of the click for Power School to go up,
Yeah.
we'll maintain the easy transfer of IEPs electronically
Okay.
with eSped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
MSBA roofing project, and so in the drive, you'll see a folder that says MSBA info. So Michelle and Natasha and I were on the roof, as we told you a couple of months ago. MSBA came out. We were waiting for the section of Fuller Meadow roof to age to get to 30, I think it's 25 or 30 years. I always forget that. One or the other, 25 or 30 years. It's now there, so we put in an SOI to see if we could get accepted into the MSBA program. MSBA is roughly 40 cents on the dollar, which is great in terms of money and partnering with the state. And so in the drive are two documents. One is a letter that went to our town administrator, and then one is a copy of the email that was sent as well. And so if you open up the copy of the email first, pleased to inform you that on November 30th, the MSBA Board of Directors voted to invite the town of Middleton into the ARP program to collaborate with MSBA in conducting a schematic design study at the Fuller Meadow School for a potential partial roof replacement as outlined in the attached board action letter. The board action letter provides the district's commencement date and explains the next steps following its invitation into the ARP. The following documents. I will assist the district through, this is Maria, the project coordinator, speaking, and answer any questions you may have, and so on and so forth. And then the other letter in there is sort of the official notification letter as well. That's the one that reads board action letter. That's a 4-page letter which kind of identifies, roofs are 25 years or more. That's on the second page. And then it lists when our commencement date was. And so the good news was we got accepted in Boxford and in Middleton, which was really super news because it's a very competitive program. And we had a section of roof at Cole School that needed to be replaced and a section at Fuller. If we're successful when we get these done, we won't be touching roofs in the Tri-Town for another 15, 20 years, which is a huge win for the three towns because that's a major project. If you go to page 4 of this letter, it talks about the prerequisite document schedule of deliverables, and so our commencement date was November 1st, which was Friday of last week. And then there's some things that are due 90 days out, 90 days out, 90 days out, and then 120 days out. As you may recall, money was passed at last year's town meeting for schematic design. A $300,000 warrant article was passed, so we sort of have that, which I think probably positioned us very well in the MSBA eyes. Like, okay, they're shovel ready. They're like ready to, the town's on board, and they believe that protecting their assets is an important thing in terms of our school buildings. And so we have a phone call set up with this Maria, what's her last name? No, that's Mary Piketty, the one on the email. Maria Carprigno from the project coordinator at MSBA. We've got a call set up with her on Friday. Again, this is for schematic design, and so then the schematic design would produce a price of what it would cost to replace the roof, and then we would have to go to town meeting, probably in, I don't think it would be next year's, I think it would be the year after, but I will find this out on Friday. And then MSBA would partner with us, and whatever the price is, it would be 40 cents on the dollar would come from the state. So we'd be paying like a 60% cost for this, which would be a huge win for the town. Going back to our earlier conversation, I've learned that this has no connection to MBTA. This money, I don't think, I've learned that there's no ties to it or anything like that. So this would be sort of independent of that entire process. So the best I could tell you at this point is more to come. It's very good news that we got accepted into the program. It's a very competitive program. And we have successfully navigated MSBA builds across the 3 towns for a long time, many projects in the 9 years I've been here, and many other projects, if you think like Steve Clifford and Steve Greenberg and their tenure here. So we know how to do it, and we've got good partners at the town level to do this work. So more to come on it, but happy to take questions that folks may have.
No, this is great. Good work on all
Yeah.
of this. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for that. And no, it's exciting.
Does it expire? Like, is there a, like, if we don't get it done by,
Yeah, there's dates that you have to meet, Jackie.
I saw the other
Sure.
timeline, but, because you were saying it might not happen till next,
And
2
don't
years
quote me on that, I'll find that out Friday.
Okay.
I can't remember if it's, like, when we get the schematic design and we get the money, how much time we have, so I'll find that out for sure. But yeah, there's a window,
Okay.
for sure. Because they want to see the money spent, because otherwise they'll be like,
Right.
oh, we could have given it to
Right.
Tewksbury.
Okay.
They would have spent the money, so we want to make sure we can take advantage of it. But the select board had to submit a statement that they were in support of it.
Okay.
School committee, you guys, a year ago, we had to do a vote and submit that, so everyone's going into this eyes wide open.
Okay.
And again, if we can get the rest of these roofs done and not have to worry about this for 15 to 20 years across 3 towns, huge win
Okay.
for the 3 communities, for sure. And then before we go to achievement update, just real quick, number 6, I realized the other day I was going through calendar for the next couple of months. We have not picked a Saturday budget meeting date, and we probably want to get that on the calendar before everyone's dance card.
I thought I had January 25th.
Oh, did we pick it? Hold on, maybe this is the town that did pick it.
Oh, I have it too, 8:30?
Yeah.
This is the one.
Okay, so the other 2 towns haven't.
It's just this
So what do we have, just so I have it on my calendar right?
January 25th.
Hold on. January
Yeah, it's in.
25th, yes, 8:30, probably at Fuller Meadow. Great, so this was, so I think, Matt, it was Topsfield.
This is the
and
only one. Yeah.
Boxford that has it, so you guys were A+.
Yay.
I'm sure that Topsfield and Boxford are gonna say, we'll do January 25th, and we'll say, take a hike. Not happening. All right, great, that checks that one, and then student achievement update, Peggy's here, back again, as a follow-up from our last presentation. This is our annual MCAS. We have it up on the screen, it's gonna be difficult for you guys to see on the screen, but that's more for TV. Everybody has it in the drive as well, and so, okay with the chair to turn over?
Yes, please.
Great.
Thank you.
Evening, everyone. So this is our usual presentation, just to kind of update you on this year's results from MCAS. So just starting off, I think to frame, something that we do think is an impact on our district is this issue of attendance. So this is one of the factors that DESE looks at in our overall accountability rating. It counts for 10% of our accountability rating in terms of the percentage of students who are chronically absent. And this is just a slide that was, it's a couple of years old here, but it demonstrates the point of, if you look at the colors, and it is in the deck, and it's hard to see from where you are, but the blue indicates the bottom, the left-hand side of that bar graph is referring to kids who are chronically absent, meaning they've missed 10% of the school year, is 18 days or more, so roughly a month of school, compared to kids who are not chronically absent. So in terms of the percentage of kids who are meeting or exceeding on the MCAS, for kids who are chronically absent in ELA, it's only 29%. For kids who are here, with the frequency that we would hope they would be, it's 54%. So it's a huge difference. Same thing over in math. It's 22% for chronically absent students and 51% for not chronically absent, 51%. And it got worse post-pandemic, partially because kids already had holes, and then you add absences on top of holes. It reduces that performance even more. So this is just something that we're watching, because when we look at the attendance data for Middleton, we were looking at pre-pandemic about 28% of kids were absent 10 days or more, so had missed at least 2 weeks of school. And we had about 5% of our kids who were chronically absent, meaning that basically a month of school that they would be missing. Those numbers spiked just coming out of the pandemic. We had 60% and 20% in those numbers, so they were huge numbers. And it has been dropping, so it's improving. It's going in the right direction, obviously, but we still, this past year, 40% of our kids missed at least 2 weeks of school. And then we had another almost 10%, so almost 1 in 10 students missed a month of school. So when you think of that much time lost on instruction and the impact on achievement, it's just a variable for us, and it just continues to be something that's a concern. It's a little beyond our control, but it does impact our achievement. So I think it's just important for us to point that out, that those numbers, while down, are still very high in terms of the number of students who are missing significant chunks of time of school. In terms of student growth, so the typical growth range, this is basically comparing students to other students across the state who perform similarly to them on past MCASs. So it's sort of a like-to-like comparison across the state, and that is in a range of 40 to 60 is considered to be typical growth. Below 40 would be low growth. Above 60 is high growth. So you can see that in 4th and 5th grade, our scores are in that typical growth, and 6th grade had phenomenal growth. 65 in ELA and 69 in math. So they're performing at the high level, and the other grade levels are performing at sort of that typical range. So overall, good news when it comes to our student growth.
And these are last year's 4th, 5th, and 6th graders.
Correct. We're always looking at, so these are spring 2024 results.
Okay.
Yeah, so the 6th graders are currently at Masco in 7th grade. So in terms of the, just the graph for the achievement for the charts that you're about to see, so blue is exceeding expectations, green is meeting, partially meeting is the orange, and red is not meeting expectations. So the state's expectations is that students will be meeting or exceeding, so we look at that as a combined total when we report out those percentages, what percentage of students were meeting or exceeding the targets. So when we look at grade 3 ELA, we had 63% of our students meeting and exceeding. The state average was 42%. So it's always useful to look at the state averages because we want to see a fairly healthy differential, and in this case, we're 21 percentage points above state average. And that is actually really, when you compare to our own past performance, we're definitely up, looking at 16% of our students being in the exceeding category. So that's more than double than what we had last year, and the number of kids not meeting dropped in half. So nice progress there on the part of 3rd grade ELA. 4th grade ELA is above the state, a more narrow margin above the state, and a little unusual. You can see that the percentage of students in that partially meeting has definitely grown this past year. And so in looking more closely at the results, the issue, so writing tends to be a weakness for us compared to reading. It's one of the things that we're hoping to address through adopting a core ELA program, is to have more consistent writing instruction from K to 6. But this past year, the constructed response was just difficult for students. That particular question, which counts for quite a few points, was actually below state average. So that, I'm not sure why this particular year that spiked, but that's just part of that larger issue of writing that we're seeing in the district, and that is kind of what caused that graph to skew this year in ways that are sort of not typical if you look to past years. In terms of 5th grade, we are looking at results that are pretty comparable to last year, and 53% compares to 38% of the state, so it's a healthy margin. And then at 6th grade ELA, we're 20 percentage points above the state, 60% meeting or exceeding versus 40% for the state. The bar graph is really interesting. You can see huge numbers of kids in the exceeding category, so 21% of our kids exceeding. And at the state level, when you look at these bar graphs, it tends to be a relatively small number of kids in exceeding and a very relatively small number of kids in not meeting, right? So to have that big spike is really nice to see, that 21%. And then the 19% is higher in this group as well. So this particular group, this shows up in math for them. It showed up in last year's science for them. So it's just kind of this particular class had a real range of needs. So we had some really strong students, and we had some students with more significant needs, and you can kind of see that playing out as the scores in that particular year.
Was there any data on, like, do we know if they were like all getting the same questions wrong, or was it kind of like all over the place, or do you not know?
Yeah, so I mean, when you look at the analysis from this level, it's more about like the overall trend. So it's not down to like what kid got what question, but we can see which questions students are performing well on versus not so well on. And so the general split comes down to the writing is where it comes generally. Not to say that reading isn't in play, but when we see from year to year big swings in the ELA scores, it generally is more towards the writing, not being as strong. And we know that that's an area that we need to grow in as a district.
If somebody is doing a portfolio, is that included in the not meeting, or is
I
that
don't believe
completely
so.
separate
I don't think that,
data?
I think this is like straight up who actually took the official MCAS. Is that true, Jeff? Pretty sure it's not part of it.
Yeah, I'll check, I'll look into that and answer that question
Yeah,
for you.
it changed.
Yeah.
When it used to be
It was.
the number, the CPI, students taking a portfolio couldn't get higher than the 75, which was kind of in the, what was partially meeting. I don't
Right.
know how they replace it now.
So I think it affected those accountability ratings for the school, but not necessarily, I do not believe it's part of this number, but Matt will check on that. Yeah. So that year, so it's a very skewed, right? We're seeing really high achievement, and we're also seeing a higher than normal need within that particular cohort. So kind of looking overall at what the trends were, so this, to your question about like sort of, are you noticing certain questions or certain things that are coming up as areas of strength or weakness? So in terms of reading skills, our students are very good at identifying the main idea. They're good at understanding characterization. Those tend to be strengths. This year's test for popped on the questions around sort of author's purpose, like why did the author choose to write in this particular way, were a little harder for students. So I think that's something that we can try to address a little bit more directly with the instruction. In terms of the writing, so often we've had writing production down in the area for growth. So this year writing was improved, and that shows up in our conventions scores, because when the writing is lower, when students' essays are very short, they tend to get low scores in conventions because the state wants to see enough volume in order to be able to say whether or not they had control over the convention. So if they write too little, not only do they get a lower score for ideas, but they also get a lower score for conventions. So what we were seeing in this year's results, and this is good news, is that the students are writing more, right? And it's showing up in higher conventions in general. The one exception was that constructed response in grade 4, which they didn't do well on. But on the other essays, there was improvement within the writing, so that was nice to see. In terms of math, they also did very well, so we only had 1% not meeting, which is great, and 14% were exceeding. So overall, 69% meeting and exceeding versus 44% at the state. In grade 5 math, it's 54% meeting versus 46%. It looks pretty similar to last year's results, a little bit better, but just comparable to last year's results. In terms of grade 5, it's 41% meeting and exceeding and 40% meeting. So that's closer to the state average than we like to see. And that's been a couple of years in a row that we're seeing that. So I think that's an area where we want to maybe pay a little bit more attention to pacing, making sure that they're getting the attention with the right proportion on the topics, because that's popped a couple of years in a row. And generally, as you can see from the data, we usually see at least a 10 percentage point spread from the state average. We're not seeing that in this 5th grade group this year. And then 6th grade, we're seeing again that spread of like some really high performance, some other areas, and lots of students in the middle. So 52% versus 40% in 6th grade. And in terms of the curriculum trends, so we generally see lots of strength around place value, so that has a lot to do with number sense for students. It's very strong in grades 3 and 4. Sometimes like as many as 20 percentage points above the state, which is great to see. In grade 5, that was a relative area of weakness, which I think helps to explain in some ways why we were seeing those results within grade 5. In terms of fractions, it depends on what we're talking about. Fractions are a really difficult concept for students, so we're strong when it comes to decimal notation and fraction equivalence, but could use some work on unit fractions and multiplying and dividing fractions. Multiplication and division overall is a strength, as is area and perimeter. Unit conversion, which often kids have trouble with, but that is an area for growth. And then we have a number of geometry concepts, so attributes of shapes, lines, and angles, and graphing on a coordinate plane. So in the Math and Focus curriculum, geometry comes late. It's late in the year, and so there's always something that is like late and maybe didn't quite get as much attention as the other topics, and so you can kind of see that tends to fall in that category because we sort of run up against the end of the year in terms of instructional time when it comes to the geometry. And then in terms of 6th grade, the standards are different, which is why there's a separate slide for 6th grade, but overall, we're really pretty strong across the board in 6th grade math. The one area is statistical variability. Not only is that a challenging topic, but it's also what comes at the end of the year, right? In terms of like, there's always something. We have a good month of school or so, or beyond MCAS, and that's when some of these concepts are being taught. So it's not that they're not being taught, they're just not necessarily getting taught before we take the test, and then it shows up that way on the results. And then in terms of science and engineering, we're at 55% versus 45% for the state. So that's, not, last year we had for meeting and exceeding, we had 45% of kids. This year we've got 55% of kids. So overall, doing pretty well in science. That MCAS is going to change pretty significantly this spring, and we've been doing a 4-part PD series for our teachers this fall around those changes. It's going to be much more focused on having kids do digital simulations and really interpreting data and drawing conclusions. So taking their science knowledge but applying it as opposed to answering more factual questions, which is what the test has been in the past. So that's going to be a sea change for the whole state. And it will be difficult to compare future results to this year because the test itself is going to be so different starting this spring. And we've been doing a lot of work to prepare our teachers and our students for that transition at the end of this year. And then just a refresher around the accountability system. So there's several different components to what goes into our accountability ratings. There's a normative and a criterion referenced component. So the normative is how we compare to other school districts who serve similar grade spans that we do. And then the criterion reference is that based on our performance, the state sets targets for improvement, and we get points to the degree to which we've made progress toward the targets that they've set for us. So that's unique to every school. That's not like a blanket thing that happens to the state. It's always compared to your own past performance and what you need to grow in. So the things that we are measured on, we're measured on overall achievement on the MCAS, on our student growth, and also our chronic attendance or chronic absenteeism is that other rating. So those are the 3 factors that go in and determine our overall rating as a district. So in terms of the scale of point assignment, this is important to note because if you decline at all, so there's even like a 1-point decrease in your score, you get 0 points. So it can have a huge swing, like even small decreases in performance can lead to big differences in your accountability ratings because you pick up no points if you've had any decline at all. If you stay the same, there's no change, you pick up 1 point. If you've improved but not to the target that they've set, it's 2 points. 3 points as you've made the target, and 4 points as you have exceeded the target that the state has set. And they rate this both on, there's a whole bunch of different categories, but they rate it not only for all students, but also the students who have been designated the lowest performing students based on past MCAS. They look at them separately as well to see how well you're helping the lowest performing students to improve. And all of those ratings together are added up to equal the accountability rating. So overall, this past year, we achieved 48% of our accountability targets, leading to an overall, over the 2-year span, of 54%, which puts us in the category of substantial progress toward target. So that is not anything that the state is worried about. There's no, they don't intervene at that level, that they're generally happy, therefore making that kind of progress. And you can see when you look overall that we are, in most cases, for all students, meeting our targets for ELA achievement, for growth in both ELA and math. And even though our attendance is still not where we want it to be, the fact that there's been any improvement at all gave us a 4, so that improved our targets. And then when we're looking at the lowest performing students, really good growth, but the achievement is not quite where we'd want it to see it. So those are the targets that all together added up to that 48%. And the overall accountability percentile up there at 78, so we're at the 78th percentile compared to other districts that are similar to ours in terms of the grade spans that they serve. So that's a good percentage, overall good percentile to be at a 78th percentile. And then in terms of next steps, so rather than being reactionary to any one year's, MCAS scores, we have larger systems that we're trying to change. So we talked to you last month about the logic models that we've been looking at around special education, some work that we're doing around math, and also the work we're doing related to literacy. And one of those things, of course, is our process that we're in right now to adopt a core ELA program that we think will help solidify our reading, but also our writing, which we know is just a known need. And then we're continuing to refine our math pacing. It's just always a challenge because something always comes after MCAS, right? Like there's school left. We're still teaching, the test happens. But how can we think about getting as much of that prior to MCAS as we can? And then continuing to monitor that attendance because, if they're not here, we can't teach them. And we're still seeing pretty high numbers in terms of students being out for significant number of days. So that is it for the presentation.
One question I had on the absenteeism, are we seeing that same kind of rate in other towns?
It's not as high. So it's definitely higher across the whole state and
Okay.
higher in the other two towns than it was pre-pandemic, but it's not this high.
Is it kids missing the entire day, or is it like they come in at 11 or they leave at 1, or is it a mix?
Absences are missing the whole day.
Okay.
So coming in at 9:30.
Yeah,
You're present.
okay, okay.
Are you seeing a lot of absences on half-days?
Has there been a correlation drawn between kind of the special education population and the absentee rate? Is there?
I don't think there's a significant difference between disabled, non-disabled.
Is it the same kids kind of year over year?
So,
Yeah.
Is it the go on vacation people? Like, remember after COVID, people were like, I don't care, I'm going on
we
vacation.
still have a lot of that.
That's some of it, yeah. Yeah, because if you plan 2 vacations a year, and then you get sick as well, and you're talking 10 days on vacation,
There you
and
go.
then that's only a couple
And
more
then you get
days
the
to get
flu
sick
or-
throughout the year, so.
And the travel industry doesn't help that, right? Like,
No.
No, there's no
jack up the
discounts.
prices on, you know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think you'd have less of that. I don't say I wouldn't. I think you'd have much less of it if you didn't have, let's double the price to go away during a school vacation. I mean, that's,
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Peggy, will you, and Matt, will you pull so the data that you presented to us last time was not MCAS related, but you have pulled out the disability related data for MCAS. Is there a timeline for when, do you plan on doing that again?
Plan on doing what?
I think you've pulled in the past, you've pulled like, where the gap is and within this data, like how the disability population fared.
Right.
And I guess that's less of a you question, a little bit more of a you question, but.
Yeah, last year when we did this presentation, part of it was a little bit of a discussion around how the students with disabilities performed and compared. Those numbers in conjunction with the screeners was all part of the work that we did for the past couple of years around what we presented last time.
Okay.
So we have all looked at that information again. Obviously, we always break down all subgroups and kind of look at it and see where it's fit. Everything in the performance of students with disabilities has, in some grades it has increased, in some grades it remained relatively stable. I think the takeaway is the work that we're going to continue doing around the logic model that we presented last time is still relevant topic, right? The gap didn't dissipate completely in a year. So it's kind of where we're at with that piece.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note the logic models we were presenting are like future action, and so these are past scores, right? So you wouldn't necessarily expect to see that having changed these results.
I think too, I think we don't have the benefit of is, when I sat in Peggy's chair years ago at a different district, it was K to 12. You could look at it holistically from like the class in 3rd grade, when they were in 5th grade, when they were in 8th grade, when they were in 10th grade, right? You could sort of do that analysis, and we would do that. Like, we'd look back, and you'd see like what you want to see, which is as a class, right? And that's because there's more education happening, right? They're growing and developing and all those things. And so that's a piece that I think sometimes gets lost a little bit in our setup, is that, we have 3, 4, 5, 6, but at the end of the day, it's all still elementary, right? And it was always fun to kind of look at that group in 10th grade, when they were in 3rd grade 7 years before, and then kind of follow them all the way through. I'm sure you did that in your previous iteration as well.
No, thank you. This is always interesting information for us to see.
Yeah,
One other
we'll-
question, say the ballot measure passes, will that impact the information that you're bringing to us next year? We're still gonna be taking them, and I know it's a graduation requirement, so that's not necessarily impacting us, but will we still be utilizing the same information?
Yeah, I mean, I've not heard that the state has any plans to change how it administers the test or does the accountability. So at our level, I don't anticipate a big change. It really is at 10th grade where, obviously it changes graduation. It may also change some motivation for kids to put a lot of effort into the test. So you might see scores go down if you know what I mean, because at the elementary level, like it is a measure of our schools, but individual students, there's not accountability for, right? And so that's the one thing that will change at the high school level. Without individual accountability, there could be some effort pieces. It's hard to say. I mean, but I don't believe that the state has any, unless you've heard something different. I don't believe that they're planning to change anything about MCAS or how it's administered or how our accountability ratings are calculated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, it's good results, thank you. Okay, so I think all we have left is the consent agenda.
Yep.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion to accept the bills and payroll as presented?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, I think we're done. 5 minutes early.
Nice.
Nice.
I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.